Russia has deployed troops to Kazakhstan, and you may be aware of the fact that Russia has deployed troops to the Ukrainian border, some 250,000 of them, I believe. So it's kind of surprising that they've also sent troops elsewhere. So supposedly, Russian paratroopers have arrived in Kazakhstan as part of a peacekeeping mission by a Moscow-led military alliance to help the president regain control of the country, according to Russian news agencies. So if we look at where Kazakhstan actually is, we've got Russia to the north, we've got Uzbekistan in the south, Kyrgyzstan to the south as well, and then China to the east.
It's a glorious German language map we have here.
I know.
Russland.
I was somewhat limited with the Creative Commons ones I could actually use.
Oh, yes.
Never mind. So anyway, Kazakhstan's president, Kasim Yomart Tokayev, is that right?
Wait, I can't see it.
Tokayev seems about right, but never mind.
Oh,
It's not important. I can't pronounce anything outside of the British Isles correctly. Asked for the intervention from a collective security treaty organisation, which is an alliance made up of Russia, Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan itself, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. And this was on Wednesday, and this has swiftly been approved. Of course, that we are doing this on Thursday, and it's going to go up on Saturday, most likely.
So there may be some developments in the meantime.
Yes. So if we could move on to the video of the Russian tanks arriving here. So makes you wonder what is going on, because there's quite a few of them, and we're just seeing a lovely wintry landscape. It looks quite Christmassy.
Put some really cheery, jingly music over the background of this, couldn't you?
Yeah. Jingle bells, maybe. Although, I do wonder what presents they're bringing. Heavy armoured shells. But
Probably
as you
not
can
that
see,
time
this
of the
doesn't seem like your usual peacekeeping mission, does it? A fleet of highly armoured tanks driving into the country, and it's still going now. But that was quite a few, just to emphasise the point. So if we move on to an article by the BBC, Kazakhstan unrest, dozens killed in crackdown. So what's been going on is there have been protests in response to the doubling of the cost of liquefied petroleum gas. And the doubling of the prices was caused by the government lifting the price cap on LPG, which many people use to fuel their cars. And I mean, anyone with any knowledge of economics knows that price caps are stupid and they don't work. And when you lift them, it makes prices skyrocket. And I mean, you do that in a pandemic, more or less. You're not going to have good results. So protests obviously started like this, and as many protests often do, it spiraled into something far greater. There are lots of other political grievances, mainly economic, as far as I'm aware, which has led to the resignation of the government in their entirety, I believe.
Wow.
So the president, who has not resigned, has described the protests, however, as foreign-sponsored terrorists, which is an interesting move. However, it has certainly diverted some Russian troops away from Ukraine. So, I mean, I haven't really done enough digging to know conclusively either way, but I'm not going to dismiss it out of hand. It's certainly possible. Obviously, the state of Kazakhstan could be described somewhat as authoritarian. I think I might be putting it a little bit lightly, because most elections in Kazakhstan are won by the ruling party with nearly 100% of the vote, because there is no effective political opposition. So I think that ticks the box to call them authoritarian, I would imagine. So far in these protests, 12 members of the security forces have been killed and 353 have been injured. About 1,000 people have reportedly been injured in the unrest, with 400 being treated in hospital and 62 in intensive care.
Wow.
And this is just the figures we have at the minute.
Yeah.
I feel like they're probably not going out and collecting accurate data when there's chaos on the streets, as we shall soon see. So the crackdown on the protests have not been universal, because police forces in Aktobe and somewhere.
Atirau?
There we go, that'll do. I really shouldn't be reading.
I hope that's the Kazakh name and not the Germanization of the Kazakh.
No. these are actually the Kazakh names this
Right.
time, don't worry, have actually sided with the protesters. So these are, I believe, some towns outside of the capital where the police forces have just said, listen, we're not going to stop. We're just going to side with you instead.
Right.
The president, as I alluded to earlier, has not resigned. He has imposed a nationwide emergency that includes curfews and the ban on mass gatherings. However, as we shall see, this has certainly not been heeded. So if we go on to the next video, we will see protesters handing out guns from the back of a car just to random people. And obviously, that's not going to help the escalation of things. And
Seems quite well organised.
And emphasising the point that they're well organised, they have actually captured and detained some military personnel, as we can see in this next video. I certainly don't envy those soldiers, I must admit.
It's hard to see what's really going on there, because you've only got.
I think they were checking them over for weaponry and things like that. But I think they're just angrily trying to get them to submit, really. But it didn't seem like they're actively trying to hurt them. But I mean, the video ended there, so we don't know exactly what's going on yet. It's still an ongoing thing at the time of recording, so it's difficult to speculate whether they're being given fair treatment or not, really. But it's important to show these sorts of things. So in some wider chaos here, we can see protesters using cars to break up police shield walls, where they're driving the cars into these big shield walls. If you can play the next clip. It's not exactly the highest frame rate, but you can see roughly what's going on here. Obviously, this is quite a built-up area. And then as soon as the car drives through, all of the police charged them. I believe that's actually a police building that they're defending there. So, not to characterize everything as necessarily violent, there have also been peaceful protests as well. If we move on to the next video, it's just people marching down the street, not really causing any destruction. But it just gives you an impression of the vast scale of what's actually going on here. It's incredibly loud.
Wow,
And you notice the police cars there as well, or it might be ambulances, I don't know. It's difficult to tell.
They look like police, is they?
Yeah. They're more or less being left alone here. So it's not strictly against the police per se, I don't think. You can see there's an emergency services vehicle there pulling in, and so it's more or less being left alone, isn't it?
Yeah.
So they're not specifically targeting them. So we can also look to perhaps one of the darker sides of things. Rioters took over the National Security Committee's building and have acquired lots of weapons, including things like mortars, which are somewhat indiscriminate for your protest. But
that's a very good point.
You can see all the magazines and weaponry lying around. There's a bulletproof vest there, or a combat jacket. I can't really tell the difference. You should see in a second. Oh, it might have just. I might have turned when I was talking about it, but there's someone with a great big mortar.
Yeah, I saw it.
So yes, and on the more destructive side, the Akimat main government building has been set on fire as well, as we can see here. So we've kind of seen a huge spectrum of different things happening here. We've seen people more or less peacefully protesting. We've also seen people arming the population.
Yeah.
And at the moment, we don't really know what's going on. Obviously, the government has resigned, but the president has not. And there's this coalition of basically Russia-aligned countries that have gone in to keep the peace, supposedly, although I'm not entirely sure what that will entail. But at the minute, it's not necessarily looking good. I don't know whether this is going to carry on for very long or what's going to happen. What's your kind of impression from what you've seen so far?
I think it's a curious development. My attitude towards these countries is generally the ministers don't matter as much as they might somewhere like the UK. It seems like the president is an autocrat on some level, and so the people potentially think of him as a king with his ministers in that sort of way. So it doesn't matter how many of the ministers get sacked, it's the king that matters. And if Tokayev stays in power, then he will consider this, I think, a success. So, we'll have to watch the developments.
Yes, but I thought it would be important to highlight this because it's something that's happening in Russia's borders.
Absolutely.
And I think how we see Russia dealing with the situation there might indicate as to their intentions in, say, Ukraine. Because at the minute they've sent in a few paratroopers, but we don't know whether they're going to stay, whether they're going to go, and it's worth keeping an eye on because it might give us an idea about how Russia is going to exert its external influence.
Yeah, that's true.
In the future. But hopefully it stays peaceful, and hopefully...
it's also a pretty interesting example of Russia's military alliance mobilizing.
Yeah, well, it happened very quickly, didn't it? I mean, they basically were asked on Wednesday, and they're already here the next day, as of time of recording. So that's
paratroopers. They were rather parachuted in, weren't they?
Oh dear.
Sorry.
If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast, The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the content we have on the site, such as this article from Hugo that is free, which is Why the Housing Crisis is Happening, in which he explores the real issues about why we have such a crisis in the West. If you'd like to find out what else is coming out on the website, you can always go to getter.com and follow us at lotuseaters_com. Thank you and goodbye.